Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to call to order this organizational meeting of the Flint City Council. And I would bring your attention to Section 3-103 of the Flint City Charter, subsection A. The President of the City Council shall be elected to a one-year term. The Council may elect such other officers and appoint such committees and subcommittees as deems necessary. And also in subsection B of 3-201, it's indicated that the city clerk shall preside at the meeting until the City Council has chosen a president. Thus, my presence in this illustrious seat this evening.
That's what it is.
And so,
Look good up there, Inez.
well, thank you, sir. At this time, we will start the rotation with respect to the election of the president. We'll start with Mr. Lloyd.
Scott Kincaid.
Ms. Poplar.
Scott Kincaid.
Mr. Nolden.
Scott Kincaid.
Mr. Freeman.
Kincaid.
Mr. Lawler.
Sheldon Neely.
Mr. Neely.
Sheldon Neely.
Mr. Wayhill.
Scott Kincaid.
Mr. Sargentson.
Sheldon Neely.
Mr. Kincaid.
Scott Kincaid.
The vote is 6 for Councilman Kincaid and 3 for Mr. Neely. And with that, I will vacate the seat and ask Mr. Kincaid, as the president-elect, to come forward.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for conducting the first part of the meeting. We appreciate the work that you do, even though there are some in this community that don't recognize the hard work that you do. So on behalf of all my colleagues, I want to thank you for the work that you do for the City Council, the City Clerk's office, and most of all, the City of Flint. And to my colleagues, I just want to thank you again for your support, and I will continue to work as hard as I have in the past for all of us, because what we do is important, not just for us individually, but for our community and moving our city forward and trying to get over some of these hurdles that have been put in place by the state of Michigan. So hopefully we can work together and move our community forward. So thank you again for your support. I believe next is the roll call for the Vice President. Madam Clerk, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Poplar.
B.B. Nolan.
Mr. Nolden.
Brian Nolden.
Mr. Freeman.
Nolan.
Mr. Lawler.
Sheldon Neely.
Mr. Neely.
Bernard Lawler.
Mr. Wayhill.
B.B. Nolden.
Mr. Sargentson.
Bernard Lawler.
Pardon?
Bernard Lawler.
Mr. Kincaid.
Councilman Bryant Nolden.
The vote is 5 for Mr.
I didn't
Lloyd.
cast a vote,
I'm
Madam
sorry.
Clerk.
One more, I'm sorry. Mr. Lloyd, I
Brian
apologize.
Noden.
Pardon?
Brian Noden.
Okay. Okay, the vote is 6 for Mr. Nolden, 2 for Mr. Lawler, and 1 for Mr. Neely. Mr. Nolden is the Vice President.
Mr. President, I would like to thank my colleagues for voting for me. I do not take this job lightly. I'm going to do the very best job that I possibly can. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Councilman, Council President.
Councilman Lloyd.
If I may, I just would like to take this time to thank Councilman Dale Wayhill for his service the last 3 years. He's served this council and served the community as the Vice President of the City Council, and we've become great friends. When I was elected President in our first year, he was elected Vice President. We were able to do a lot of work together and working with the body, and so I just want to say to you, thank you for your service and all that you do, all that you have done, and everything that you're going to do for this community.
And I also would like to echo those same sentiments to Councilman Wayhill for serving as Vice President and being there, attending the meetings and representing our community well, and especially when I couldn't be there, stepping in and representing this city. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Thank you.
Good job, Dale.
Thank you both for those very nice words. I appreciate it, and congratulations, Mr. Vice President. Councilman Nolden, I'm sure you will do a fine job. I will say it used to be a lot more fun a couple of years ago, but and more productive, I think, for the city. I've enjoyed serving in this role, and I'm happy to have passed it on to another leader on council. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call our regular city council meeting to order. And roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Lloyd?
Present.
Ms. Poplar?
Present.
Mr. Nolden?
Present.
Mr. Freeman?
Present.
Mr. Lawler?
Present.
Mr. Neely?
Present.
Mr. Wayhill?
Here.
Mr. Sargentson?
Present.
Mr. Kincaid?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd ask Councilman Nolden to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please all rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we remain standing for just a moment or two to remember our veterans today as Veterans Day? So, thank you. Thank you.
We can also continue to stand, Mr. President, for a moment of silence for the Deloach family. Pastor Emeritus, Pastor Roosevelt Deloach, passed away on last Monday. His funeral was today, and if we could just have a moment of silence for his family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One additional, I was going to get in it before we, Pastor David Hornaday passed away. And so if we can have one more moment of silence, remembrance for his life and his family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, is there any special order or unfinished business this evening?
Yes,
Mr. President,
I'm sorry.
I have a special order. I would like to give the city clerk some time this evening to respond, to talk about the election, what happened, and to respond to some things that have been said and printed, I believe, being accountable to the people, but an appointee of this body, we should give her an opportunity to respond to that, make whatever appropriate comments she deems necessary.
Thank you, Councilman Lloyd. Madam Clerk?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to address our voters here in the city of Flint this evening with respect to the most recent election for president, the election of President Barack Obama. I think within the last week, you all have been bombarded with articles in the Flint Journal that were very negative towards the clerk's office as it relates to the slowness, so to speak, and I'll use that word in quotation marks, with respect to the counting of the absentee ballots. And I think it's important to note that this is the first time since I've been clerk that we have ever received 10,000 absentee ballot requests. In fact, we received 10,700 AV requests, and we actually received back in the office 10,000 absentee ballots, which is an astronomical number of ballots to process. Quite frankly, it would equate to 20,000 ballots, because each ballot was 2 pages. Now, my remarks today is not to try to make any kind of excuses and so forth, but to put everything in proper perspective, because the Journal has not. In yesterday's editorial, they made it look as though we were nincompoops and had not done our jobs. And I'll have to say to you all today, and many of you know this, that we have been working on this particular election since 2008. After the election of 2008, we knew that the election of 2012 would be humongous and historic. And therefore, at that point in time, we attempted to put into place everything in order to accommodate our voters. In that regard, we have had an ongoing recruitment effort underway for 4 years to add to the current pool of election inspectors. We've gone so far as to contact fraternities, sororities, churches, community-based organizations, and others, in addition to reaching out to both the Democrat and Republican parties, so that we can try to have in a Democratic county an equal number, if possible, of Republicans, okay? Now, having said all of that, we had in the field on that particular day close to 700 election workers. That would include the people that we had in the field, as well as the people that we had in this particular room sequestered, counting the absentee ballots. Bottom line of what I want to say to you all is twofold. Number one, the Flint Journal at no time called me to ask for a response in terms of the negativism that they were getting from various people in the community relative to the processing of the absentee ballots. And as I usually do, when they don't call, I don't call, okay? But when they editorialize things that I know are not true, in terms of the work effort that I have personally put into this, coupled with the work effort that my staff has put into it, not to mention the 700 or so people from the community, many of whom may be relatives of yours, church members and otherwise, I take exception to that. I think the least they could have done was to call and say, okay, there's a rumor, number one, that you let 30 election workers go on the night of the election. You told them that they could go home and go to bed. Okay? That's not true. We had 2 operations going concurrently. The operation that we had going over in the county building, where the election workers that are in the field have to report over there their balancing in terms of their poll book and all of their equipment and so forth, to make a determination as to whether or not they balance. In addition to that, the tape, or the computer disk, which is about that size, is left with the county person who's in charge over there that night. At the same time, we had the operation going on over here in the chambers where the people were sequestered. They had been sequestered since about 6 o'clock that morning because we had them report at 6 o'clock so that they could be ready by 7 o'clock. So the person who happened to be one of the candidates for public office who was monitoring what we do saw all the people leaving. He somehow reported back to the County Board of Canvassers that we were letting people go, and that is not the case. Those people were through in the field at the various precincts. But what we did do for the people who represent the receiving board, which would be the group of people that we have trained to look at how things are balanced and that kind of thing, or if they balance, which is another 20 or 25 people, we did ask those people to come over here to join the group that was already here to help in processing the absentee ballots. To the credit of many of those people, at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, even though they had to go to their respective jobs and they were not committed to coming here, they came over here to help. Now, the law indicates another thing, that once you enter, you cannot leave. But if you leave, you can't come back, okay? So there was a point where some of the people who came in at that time had to leave at a certain time in order to go to their respective jobs. Now, the editorial also indicated that because we were last, that cities like Detroit, Grand Rapids, and others, who had far more than we had, did process and complete their process in time. The only thing I can say to that is two things. Number one, they did not adhere to the law, and I'm not accusing my fellow clerks of doing anything illegal, but I'm just saying they did not adhere to the law if they completed their task before we did. And the reason I'm saying that is the law says that you cannot open the envelope. The law says that we cannot open your voted envelope until 7 a.m. on the day of the election. So I wonder how in the world, let's say Grand Rapids, for example, which is a city that they cite, who had 13 AVs, how could they have completed their process before we did? The other problem that we encountered was the fact that our equipment, maybe the only thing I can say is that maybe Grand Rapids had better equipment than we had. Our equipment continued to jam all day and into the evening. One of the candidates called the state because that particular candidate was a little bit antsy and wanted to know how he was doing in the absentee ballots. He didn't want to give the process a chance to work. That's on him. Now, with that particular call, it generated a person from the state to come to Flint. When that person came to Flint, that person found that we were not doing anything irregular, that in fact we were doing things according to Hoyle, and so forth. As a matter of fact, the machine jammed on her, and you know what she did? She in turn turned those particular things over to my staff people to feed through the computer. So I guess that I'm concerned that, number one, I don't feel that the Flint Journal gave me and gave my office fair coverage. I do plan to send them an op-ed letter. I've talked to the editor today to let them know how I feel, to let them know exactly how I feel. Because if in fact we had done something incorrectly, then I think they would have cause for concern. But we have not done anything incorrectly, and I feel as though whenever someone is accused of something, at least the main newspaper in the community could give the person being accused an opportunity to respond, and that did not happen. In conclusion, my staff and I will continue to work as advocates for the voters of this community. We will continue to work as hard and diligently as we ever have. But I would say that our local newspaper needs to become a little bit more unbiased and fair in its reporting. And I would ask that the next time they write an article about me that they would call me, okay, and ask for a quote. And if I cannot comment, I will say I cannot comment. But all of this is public information. And because your ballot and because your vote is so important, I felt that it was important that you know tonight exactly the truth of what has occurred. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other special order or unfinished business
No,
at this
Mr.
time?
President. No, not at this time.
Okay, are there any additional communications, Madam Clerk?
No, not at this time.
Okay, this is a time set aside for the audience to address the City Council. I will call your name. When you come to the mic, just give us your name. We don't need your address, it's on the speaker slip. Refrain from personal attacks on individuals or institutions, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. The first person to be called this evening is Mr. Milton Tucker. Mr. Tucker.
Good evening to everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I'm Milton Tucker, and I reside at 3840 Gloucester Street, Flint. What happened?
It was just the mic, I think. You're fine.
Okay. My question that I have may not be a question that you can deal with at this time, but I'm concerned about the new millage that was passed for the police and firemen's organizations. And I'm going to make a statement that I hope that you would do everything in your power to see that those funds are used in the intent that they were voted in to be used for. I read information in the paper that we might get maybe 10 police in the next 2 years, and the rest of the money was going to be put in a rainy day fund. Well, I'll tell you, the way I feel is that it's raining in Flint now. And we need all the help that we can get. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker.
Mr. President?
Councilman Neely?
Yeah, with the concern from that resident, I would like to put a referral through, and I would like to ask for follow-up from this body to the administration whenever you have the leadership meetings with Ed Kurtz or Mike Brown or whomever may be in control, is to get a good number for the residents to find out how many public safety officers will be hired and when. The millage reported that it's going to reap $5.3 million, and it's retroactive, if I understand it correctly, back to the start of our fiscal year. Usually, I've never seen a millage go back retroactive. I always looked at a millage going forward, but this one goes back retroactive, which will be on your tax bills this year, and it was to be paid by the residents of the city of Flint in the beginning of next year. So what we need to find out, and this is an official referral to the legal department, Ed Kurtz, and I would hope to the leadership of this body when you schedule your meeting with Mr. Kurtz to find out this information. Is going to be asked of all of us. How many public safety officers are we going to receive and when? Now, going by the reported publications from the newspaper that our administrative office has given to them, 10 officers, 10 public safety officers, $5.3 million. That talks about maybe $500,000 per officer. I mean, if we're looking at $5.3 million, and we're only getting 10 officers, that's maybe, and they said 100% of these funds would go toward public safety. The net cost probably be about $500,000 per officer if I'm doing my math correctly, but I would like to see from them and get their view on this, how many officers and when. It was also another publication in the Flint Journal paper that talked about who supported the Yes campaign with financial support. And I'm reading this from a publication from the Flint Journal October 26th. From the Landau Packaging Corporation, they contributed $10,000. From Kogel Meats, they contributed $10,000. Baker College, $5,000. Alcera Group, $5,000. And Hurley Medical Center, $3,000. I'm very concerned about that last one more so than anything else, for a medical facility to contribute to a political type of campaign when we as a municipality couldn't even get them to contribute to the contribution of the Civil Service Commission, which they benefited from, that we funded totally as a city municipality. And I'm very concerned about that. But these are the people who contributed from the initial reports from the Flint Journal to the Yes campaign, and I would hope they will also be supporters of everything that we try to do in this municipality as far as public safety, just not for a campaign purpose. Also, Ed Kurtz reportedly said that he would be going after an income tax increase as a latter part of trying to sustain the essential service of public safety inside the city of Flint. I want to know about that as well, and if the new leadership of this council can take that forward and get that back to us. If we can't get it in a referral form, I would ask that you guys get it in a verbal form to figure out where we go from here so we can communicate fully to the constituency in which we all serve. We still don't have a lawyer in that seat. Public Act 4 was struck down by the voters all across Michigan. Public Act 72, whether it exists or does not exist, said the city of Flint and its residents did not get due process. We were taking over under Public Act 4. Public Act 4 does not exist. We did not have any due process under Public Act 72. We should not be under any control, and our lawyers should be sitting there. I know there was a motion on the floor some time ago to remove him from his office for negligence. It's hard to remove somebody who's not here serving the public. But I would hope in this new year of leadership that you guys would take that with all due express to the emergency manager and let them know that the constituents are asking us these questions and that we have to give them a response. We have a duty and obligation to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie, Councilwoman Poplar.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, the community needs to know, because there is a deep misconception out there that our city is getting ready to be flooded with police officers. And everywhere I go, Kroger, Walmart, and everywhere else, they're asking, are the flood of police officers? And there will not be a flood of police officers this year, next year, and the year after. And there's a bad misconception. Now, my question to the administration, to the police chief, and to the in-plant police chief that was brought here. Why are we parking all of these police vehicles all of a sudden behind the police station that were moved from across the street? Is this to make the community think that we have a flood of police officers that are not working in our community? Because I don't see, as I come into this building and I'm checking day and night, and some of those same vehicles have not been moved. Half of them are probably broke down. And I think it's another tactic that this administration is using to make the people think that we have a flood of police officers that are working in this city. So I'd like to know why, first of all, did you move the trucks from across the street to the back of the police station and line them up like little soldiers that are not going to anybody's war except the war that they have with us? So that's my question. I would like to know, why are we continually hoodwinking and trying to make people think that something's happening when it is not happening? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Anyone
President.
else? Councilman Lloyd?
Just really quickly, relative to how many officers and when, and then I also want to comment on one of the pieces that Neely, you mentioned, Councilman Neely, about the $500,000 per officers. The first piece is my understanding, because we don't get a communication of everything per se that happens day to day and everything that's discussed, but my understanding is that there was an ordinance
that was put into place by our financial manager that said, follow me, that said that 100% of the police millage will go to the police department, to public safety. The thing with that, and that's another misconception, even though that ordinance is in place, and the ordinance says 100% of those funds will go to public safety operations, that does not mean that the emergency manager cannot go back and change that particular ordinance, that they can't go back and remove it and do something different with those funds. And so just because that ordinance is in place, we don't want the residents to think that that's a done deal. That can be changed. That's the first piece. The second piece is that the understanding is that the millage will not go for hiring all new officers. 100% of that millage will not go to bringing back officers, but the majority percentage of that will go toward maintaining officers that are on the rolls now that will potentially be laid off due to budget shortfalls. And we can go back and forth and discuss all day about where other dollars can be cut from positions to go to public safety, but I didn't want to hit on that, even though we know that that is the case. And so with the $500,000 per officer, that shortens it down because it's going to be going to maintain people. But this is the other piece that I want the residents to understand. Just because it's $5 million today and 10 officers supposedly are coming back whenever, let's just say today, and they're maintaining these officers, there's no guarantee that that revenue will remain the same. And just because we have the millage in place today does not mean next fiscal year or before the end of this fiscal year that additional officers won't be laid off. Because we know, even in the discussion I had with the emergency manager and Mike Brown, as well as the finance guy, I asked a question. I says, well, how can you guys be so sure that we're going to bring in this $5 million every year? And they looked at me and I said, you can't be so sure. And they nodded their head and they said they agreed. And I said, I'll tell you why, because we know that property values are dropping every year. And I asked a question. I says, well, what are those trends going to look like for the next 4 years? And I know at least 2 of those years, the property tax revenue decrease was in double digits. And so if that is the case, there's no way in the world that the city is going to take in $5 million plus year over year for the next 4 years or whatever, and there's no guarantee in line with that they'll have the funding to maintain all of those officers. So what are you saying, Del Rico? Just because that millage is in place does not mean that the community can look forward to not having any public safety layoffs.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I mean, even their own projections that they presented to the community show that after 2 years, there's double-digit layoffs continue after 2 years. So they said something like, it'll fund 10 positions for the next, the first 2 years, and then after that, for the remaining 3 years, there's double-digit layoffs. So I mean, it is what it is.
And go ahead. And if I may, I just want to be clear. For me, it ain't about beating up on nobody or whatever. We can go back and forth about that all day. But I know that the public has received a lot of different information based on this. And some of the things that we've discussed and Councilman Neely has shared and others has not per se been shared with the community. And so the community is expecting one thing, but the reality is something totally different. And so my focus and intent of my comments tonight is to make sure that the community understands a larger picture on this particular issue than what's been shared publicly and what's been shared in literature.
Councilman Neely?
Yeah, just to follow up with Councilman Lloyd, because he injected my name, I want to make sure that transparency has always been delivered from the 6th Ward seat, giving the full picture to the public as I saw them, as information came to me, and as I digested that information and brought it back to the public. It's never been no mistake in my mind that the public safety millage was not the way to finance public safety first. My thoughts and my understanding of this, that you would always attach an essential service to an inclining revenue stream versus a declining revenue stream. And I've been saying that for years and years and years, that income tax should be levied versus a property tax. Some of my colleagues are bored by some of these things that I'm saying as I hear the moans, but if it was any inkling of misleading the public, it was on the behalf of those who were trying to establish this millage going forth. If it was any information held back willingly or any malicious intent, and I'm not saying if it was or was not, it was those who communicated a poor message to the community. because as the element of fear, which is a powerful emotion or motivator, people thought if they voted for this public safety millage, that they were going to get additional officers. Members of the public safety unions, fire and police, both, they wanted guarantees to say that they were going to have more to their ranks to fight the overwhelming level of crime in this community. No one ever gave a hard number to how many public safety officers would be re-engaging the streets of the city of Flint. The malicious intent, if any, on behalf of those who tried to communicate this message that voters voted for, and if the voters are under any understanding that there are going to be more officers on the street, they need to get that question asked. They need to ask that question of the administration or emergency manager and get that information back to what their intent is. Like Councilman Freeman just shared with us that in the long-term projections, he's saying that they shared with him in long-term projections, even when this millage passed, they still will be layoffs in the public safety ranks. So I would say this, their hands will be stained with the blood of this community if they misled this community going forward, because I believe that people thought that 100% of these dollars will be used toward public safety, putting more police and fire on the streets to protect them and their family and their loved ones. And if that is not the full intent or the full message or the full dollar amount that will be going forth, they need to communicate that message. It should not come to this body and say, well, hey, we thought this. We need to go to those who communicated those messages and with a strong voice, a strong, united voice. And with that, Mr. President, I'll surrender.
Councilman Lawler?
Yeah, I just like to say that this community really has been wrong, has been misled by this public safety millage. And we currently have state police officers here. We currently have the federal government here policing our community. And we have the sheriff's department and we have our own local police officers. And the state police and the feds are not going to be here forever. So if we can't police our community better now with all of the policing that we have in this community now, how are we going to police our community with the fictition of 10 more police officers on board? 10 more police officers is not going to rescue us from the crime in this community. We need a police plan that's going to come forth that is going to really enforce ways of reducing crime in this community. And we just simply have no plan. This administration went and hired another police safety administrator, getting paid over $100,000, I believe $135,000. And, you know, that's 2 more police officers right there. And with that additional administration, you would think that the 2 administrators will come forth with a plan, a police safety plan that will impact the crime and the violence in this community. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that at all. What we have seen was a millage to come forth to overtax the residents, the poor and the middle class in this community, the struggling middle class of this community. And then the continuing tax breaks in downtown Flint. You know, it's the same agenda that is being followed on the national level that it is on the local level, giving to the rich and taking from the poor. So, you know, so I'm really regretful that this community was fooled by that millage. I didn't believe in it when the millage was put forth. I don't have faith in it now. And, you know, Mr. Tucker, I have a great respect for you. You and your wife was my kindergarten teacher. And she was the best teacher I ever had. But I don't have an answer for you. I don't have confidence in what this administration is doing with these public safety dollars that have been proposed in this millage. You know, and that question has been asked, and they never gave to me a clear answer privately or through media regarding a plan and how they're going to actually use these dollars to increase our public safety with police officers.
Anyone else? I'd just like to make a couple points to you, Mr. Tucker. You know, I didn't support the police millage. Let me tell you why. One, if the number that I hear is correct, the administration is saying that they're going to hire 10 public safety personnel in January. If you take a snapshot of how many police officers that we had the 1st of July and how many have retired from July 1st to December 31st, we will not get a net gain. Will be less because nobody's taken into the account the number of police officers that have retired. Second thing I want to point out, the emergency manager passed an ordinance that said 55.5% of the general fund would go toward public safety, and that all of this millage money would be used toward public safety. This millage is a part of the general fund. It was never set up as an enterprise fund. And unless the law has changed, the state will not allow a community to have a rainy day fund if it has a deficit. So if there's money left over in the general fund that's being collected for public safety, under the state law, a community that is in a deficit has to deplete its rainy day fund before, as a part of their deficit reduction plan. So if they were to hire 10 officers, I'm just saying 10, at wages and benefit of $100,000, which is high, that would be $1 million. That would leave $4.3 million left to go into the general fund. That's what it would amount to. So it's going to be real interesting for me to see when they say they're going to set up a rainy day fund, when the state law doesn't allow for a community that's in a deficit to have a rainy day fund, what they do with that $4.3 million when they do the audit at the end of this year. It'll be really interesting for me to see that. And I think what you'll see is that those dollars will be applied toward the deficit because they're general fund dollars. They're a part of the general taxation for the community. They weren't set up in an enterprise fund because the ballot language didn't do that. It just said public safety millage, which means it'll be a part of the 55.5% of the general fund that will support public safety. So the audit will be done here before long. And everybody heard me say that when Mike Brown took over the city, we had about an $8.3 million, $8.2 million deficit that was audited. The audit's almost done. It'll be done sometime around the 15th of December. We're going to be over 16 million. He doubled up on the deficit. Just remember that. He doubled up on the deficit and he put 6 mills on the ballot, and let's see how much of it goes toward public safety, and let's see how much of it goes toward the deficit. Because I'm here to tell you, as I told my colleagues months ago, Mike Brown's caused an $8 million deficit in the city of Flint, and he's now asked for a millage to help cover that deficit. You wait and see, because we're not going to get 50 police officers that will pay for 50 public safety officers that the $5.3 million would cover. Thank you. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Charmy Golson.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
I'm honored, humbled, and a little frightened to be speaking with you tonight. I've stepped into a hornet's nest, clearly. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Before I talk to you about why I drove here, I want to tell you about my friend Elena Horada, who delivered an eviction notice to their emergency financial manager in Detroit today. And I'm happy to speak with any of you. Yes. They're putting 50 kindergartners in a classroom in Detroit. I don't know, I mean, you folks have got your own problems going on here, clearly, like the rest of us. but I've been watching what's happening with the financial managers, and it is time to evict them. Your friend, evict him. And I can speak with you afterwards. I can give you Elena's information as well if you want to talk to her and see how they're going about doing that. So I love that you're talking about public safety. I'm the founder of Michigan Moms United to End the War on Drugs. I am the daughter of a Washtenaw County deputy sheriff. My father's a law enforcer, and I work with an organization of law enforcers called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. They're judges, jailers, prosecutors who work to end the failed drug war. And I can pretty much tell you what your police chief's plan for public safety is, because I've been looking at Michigan State Police crime statistics, your asset forfeiture statistics, and the federal grant monies that your area received from the feds to go fight drugs all day since I got a phone call from one of the women in my organization here in Flint, one of the moms here. And I brought with me this book. It's called The New Jim Crow. I highly recommend all of you purchase this book if you're not familiar with it. It's written by legal scholar Michelle Alexander. She's in Ohio. The full name of this book is The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. And I might as well just give you a little reading. How much time do I have? You said 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
What this book is intended to do, the only thing it is intended to do, is to stimulate a much-needed conversation about the role of the criminal justice system in creating and perpetuating racial hierarchy in the United States. The fate of millions of people, indeed the future of the black community itself, may depend on the willingness of those who care about racial justice to re-examine their basic assumptions about the role of the criminal justice system in our society. The fact that more than half of the young black men in many large American cities are currently under the control of the criminal justice system or saddled with criminal records is not, as many argue, just a symptom of poverty or poor choices, but rather evidence of a new racial caste system at work. One of the men that I work with at LEAP is Matt Fogg. He's a U.S. Marshal, and you can look him up. I can send you all. I'm sorry I'm not prepared. I got a call at work, so that's why I don't have all of this with me right now, but I can send it to you. He talks about being a U.S. Marshal and being told by his squad commander when he raised the point 20 years ago, why aren't we going into the white neighborhoods to go get drugs? We all know they're doing and selling drugs over there. And he was told to shut up and sit down. And he will talk very openly. He's an African-American man, and he will talk very openly about that. So my organization works to educate the media, communities, and legislators about how the failed drug war intersects with and destroys families. And what we're doing right now is we're working on reforming the civil asset forfeiture laws. We've got a bill that's going to be introduced in January, and it's going to require prosecutors and sheriffs to require a conviction before they can forfeit people's property. In Michigan, it is completely legal for law enforcement to take everything you own and never charge you with a crime, much less obtain a conviction. And I work with raid victims, and many of these families, mothers who are trying to put their children to bed when these soldiers come in their house, the masked gunmen, you probably know what I'm talking about. These women are terrified. They're waiting for these people to come back and just take more stuff. It is a war on citizens. It's the longest running civil war our country has ever seen, and it's a failed policy. We've done it for 40 years. We've spent $1 trillion. Drugs are everywhere. We have not slowed the flow of drugs into society. We have not decreased drug use, and we have launched a civil war on our own citizens. And I'm an expert in the militarization of the police. So when my father was a police officer, he had a badge and a sidearm. And that's how they dressed. And now they look like they just stepped off the plane from Iraq. We have militarized our soldiers. It's why Wayne County has a tank. The Pentagon started flooding our communities with all of this training and information and equipment in the 80s. And now it's used against us, our citizens. So, what is your plan for public safety? What do you want to see happen in Flint? Am I done?
Yeah, your 5 minutes are up. You can please sum up, though.
Okay, I will sum up. The Michigan State Police every year publish crime statistics. Here in the city of Flint, you have a 5% arrest rate per incident for murder across the board. Kidnapping is 10%. Rape is 2%. Last year, there were 197 rapes reported in Flint. 4 people were arrested. Robbery, 7%. Controlled substance violations, 106%. Our police go and get drugs. The feds give them money. They get to take everything they want through asset forfeiture. And that is where their priorities lie. Remember, my father was a police officer, and I do this work to restore right relations between communities and police. And that can't happen as long as we're still giving them money and skewing priorities. This is consistent. These numbers are consistent across the state and the country. Rape, murder, robbery, 10, 15%. Controlled substance violation, at least 80 to 100%. Now, your police chief has stated that he's going to continue, despite the recent overwhelming 60% majority vote by the people in the city to leave folks with marijuana alone and go get violent criminals. And your police chief has stated openly that he's just going to keep doing things the way they've been doing it. I would encourage you to encourage your police chief to refocus on violent crime and to take some of this money and to really, really help folks finally. And it's going to take a lot. There's no wall of China that's going to come down with this failed policy. But we don't need to be shelling out tens of thousands of dollars to communities when our kids get caught doing stuff. We don't need to be paying for our own urine tests. We need the murderers and rapists to be taken away. And you certainly got those problems here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Mr. President,
Councilman Lloyd?
everybody voted their particular conscience on that particular issue. The charter amendment, is that what it was for the marijuana? And so I'm not going to reveal how I voted. I voted how I chose to vote. But what I will say, and I am not a user of marijuana, but how I voted is my business. But I do have a concern, the fact that the residents of the city of Flint did vote to approve that particular amendment. And I did also hear that, I guess from our city attorney, that they are not going to honor that particular vote, and that they're going to continue to enforce the ordinance that restricts individuals from carrying that 1 ounce or whatever the case may be. And so I don't know what necessarily we should do. What I would do is send a referral to the financial manager, to the city administrator, as well as to Pete Bade, to find out, is it their plan not to honor that request, and get us an answer on that, number one. And then number two, if that is the case, then I would like to see if we need to contact somebody in Lansing or what we need to do so that they will honor the will of the people on that particular vote.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Gersh Avery.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to talk to you. My name is Gersh Avery. I'm from Dexter. It's a little suburb outside of Ann Arbor. I've been heavily involved in the medical marijuana community for the last 4 years, and we've been seeing a lot of remarkable things. Cannabis accelerates the healing process in the human body. Many times you have to get up into therapeutic dosage levels, and therapeutic dosage level may, for some conditions such as a cancer where you're trying to destroy a tumor, it may be as much as the equivalent of 100 joints per day that is being eaten by a patient who is successfully driving the tumor away. I'm one of those people. I use cannabis extract as a chemotherapy for myself in my bladder cancer, reduced a tumor from 2 to 3 centimeters down to a half a centimeter. At one point, 2 weeks, 14 days after the first time the tumor was spotted, it was not able to be detected in a high contrast CT scan. 14 days to obliterate it from 2 to 3 centimeters down to not being able to be detected at that point. We're seeing regenerative qualities. Skin conditions for people who have like bed sores or open diabetic sores, those sores are able to be healed up when you use the right kinds of medications that doctors are afraid to use. And the reason they're afraid to use this medicine is because of the war that has been going on for so long and the negative stigma and public officials digging their heels and insisting that this is never going to happen on my watch. As long as that kind of thing continues to take place, our medical professionals are going to be denied a very, very valuable medicine, and people will suffer as a consequence. People who are not trying to go out and just get high on a Saturday night, but people who are trying to address serious medical conditions. Doctors can't use these materials. Our hospitals can't use these materials. Our universities can't even study it. This is what the AMA, the American Medical Association, is saying. It behooves everyone to allow the normalization of this herb within our society. As far as herbal substances that are potentially dangerous, a 10-year-old child can walk into a health food store and purchase lethal dosages for 50 people of valerian root, the organic source for Valium. Can you get high on that? Absolutely. It's a Valium high. Do you see a scourge of it running around in our schools? No. You know why? Because nobody's jumping up and down screaming, evil, evil, evil. There's nobody there telling kids in our schools about, there's a burner, don't touch that, it's hot. What's hot mean? You know what I'm talking about, the forbidden fruit effect. It's out there, it's real. When DARE goes in and teaches a class in a school, there is actually an increase in drug usage among the recipients. You teach the kids, this is a drug, this is how it works, this is the kind of things that you get out of it. Some of these kids are going to sit there and go, wow, really? Nobody teaches them about valerian root. They're sitting in the health food store that you can go in and buy 5 pounds of this stuff and nuke the city if you want. That's not there. The only reason that this is a problem with marijuana is because of all the uproar that has gone on around it. And in the meantime, we're teaching our children to be using these drugs, and then in addition to that, denying by our actions and implications the ability of medical professionals to be able to save lives with these materials. We need to get our priorities right, and we need to be able to save lives with these materials. And people's lives are being saved. Cancer victims, we see neuroregeneration in MS patients. We see reversal of radiation damages from like chemotherapy radiation combinations that are administered. Dr. William Courtney of California talks about a 2-year-old child, recurring brain tumor going on, multiple, 24 straight hours of surgery on this poor child. And the child, a few months later, the tumors come back. And they go in for another 8 hours worth of surgery. And they send that child home with a prognosis of 14 days to live. They send him home with oxygen and morphine. 2 months later, somebody actually made an inquiry to see how the kid was doing. They were expecting to hear the hospice worker. They told the hospice worker, the kid's fine. Baby's fine, doing good. What do you mean doing good? Come on over and see. Child was sitting at the table eating a cheese sandwich. You know what that child had been getting after they finally got him out of the grips of the hospital system? The juice from the cannabis plant, the raw juice. That child was ingesting at least 1,000 milligrams of THC per day. This is a therapeutic dosage level we're talking about. And because it was raw, there's no intoxication that's produced. But the result of that process, after 60 days, any sign of cancer was completely gone, and in addition to that, all of the radiation burn in the brain had been reabsorbed in 60 days instead of the normal 5 years that it takes for that damage to disappear. These are incredible, powerful, health-providing medicines. We can turn off neuropathic pain in somebody's feet from diabetes. We can not only turn that pain off, but we can return feeling to the area that had been numb and do it in 45 seconds without getting someone high. But we're not going to be able to have these things in our doctors' hands and our hospitals' hands as long as people are fighting against it and raising stigmas and saying all these horrible things that are fictitious for the most part. All the marijuana propaganda we've been fed over these years. Please don't fight against these life-saving medicines that are just coming up on the horizon. And don't teach our children to have these things in our doctors' hands and our hospitals' hands as long as people are fighting against it and raising stigmas and saying all these horrible things that are fictitious for the most part. All the marijuana propaganda we've been fed over these years. Please don't fight against these life-saving medicines that are just coming up on the horizon. And don't teach our children that this is something interesting that you could try out by emphasizing this herb that God made and gave to us to work with. Please don't. And use the right resources. Focus on protecting your citizens against rapists and murderers instead of trying to protect people against a harmless plant. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Brian Morrissey.
How are y'all doing today?
Good evening, Brian.
Brian Morrissey, 318 West 2nd Street, Flint, Michigan. As many of y'all know, and the preceding speakers have spoken about, citizens of Flint voted overwhelmingly, nearly 60%, to use sensible drug policy here in the city of Flint regarding marijuana, to use our resources in a more sensible way. I was appalled when I read in the newspaper the statement of the city of Flint, Attorney Pete Bade, who's absent today, and Elvin Locke, that says they are going to continue punishing cannabis users, marijuana users, when we have these outrageous crime problems in the city of Flint, and the voters have already spoke. I think if they want to enforce state law, then perhaps the city shouldn't be paying their salary and the state should be paying their salary. Every arrest that these people make, it's like a half a day off for them. They get to take, about 4 hours off, come down, sit in the city police department down there, do a little bit of paperwork, shoot a few photos, fingerprint some people, and all that time they're not on the city of Flint streets out here. A lot of these officers are good officers, but some of these officers want to, take breaks. This is a scary city out here. A lot of them don't want to be there all the time. A lot of them are overworked, underpaid, and they feel it's their right to be able to take this little time off, go down here and take a break dealing with a nonviolent, usually pretty courteous offender. One of these ladies that just spoke, Sharmi, I know she's from Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor has been decriminalized, had marijuana decriminalized for about 40 years now. And I know a lot of people in Ann Arbor said, oh, well, when this happened, crime's going to go up. What is this going to do to our kids? What is this going to do to our university? And I think if we look back today, Ann Arbor is now, I think, one of the safest cities in Michigan. Their school systems are some of the best in Michigan. Their university is one of the most respected in the nation and even the world. I don't think marijuana decriminalization has harmed them and their city in any way, and in fact, I think it's quite the opposite. Now, our city attorney and our city police chief say that they're going to continue following state law, and it sounded like they didn't really feel like they had many other options. Now, Ann Arbor City Police, they've listened to the will of their community. They have not prosecuted people for marijuana criminally in this past 40 years, and it's been to the benefit of their community. I would like to ask you all, and I know Mr. Lloyd has already made a few referrals here. I appreciate that. I would like to ask you all as council members to stand up and support your city, the will of your city, regardless of your personal feelings on this matter, and help us make sure that the voters' interests and the will of the voter is respected here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Naira Sharif. Ms. Sharif.
Hello, my name is Nair Sharif. Before I go on to what I'm going to say, I don't know if I consider myself a community leader, but I'm out in the streets a lot. And I would like to say, and I'm proud to say this, but I'm proud to say that I did vote yes to decriminalize marijuana in the city of Flint. Because I think that, like if you just say, vote your conscience and then all this other stuff, I'm proud to say once again, I was kind of like in the majority with the will of the city of Flint. And I guess I want to say, before I go into what I'm going to say, Chief Locke, the city also voted for this millage. So which are you going to, what are you going to enforce and what are you going to buy into? Because we voted for that millage as well as decriminalization of marijuana. So I hope that Chief Locke get with the will of the people on this one. But I would like to say that I'm so happy that PA4 was repealed. And this was one thing that I could say, and kind of being behind the scenes with this whole movement, is the grassroots won on this. This was not supported by the establishment. We did not have the money like the establishment had. We did not have the support of a lot of elected officials like some of the other things that was on the ballot. And we won in spite of that. And I would like to also say that the will of the people, as we're talking about the will of the people, 75 out of 83 counties voted down PA4. So that's like another, I would say, victory in the will of the people. And I know a lot of people are saying kind of like, what's next? I remember way back, and I had to look at it again today, August 13th of 2012, when Ed Kurtz was here for a week. He said that he wasn't going to stick around like much longer after the November election. So maybe we need to kind of take a page from Detroit Public Schools and the folks down there where they did an eviction notice to Roy Roberts, who's the emergency manager of Detroit Public Schools. Maybe we need to host a moving party for Ed Kurtz, because we want to make sure that he's a man of his word, because he said publicly, I ain't gonna stay around too much longer after the election. So we want to make sure that he's about on his way with that, because it may be business as usual, but it's not business as usual for you, because you said you weren't sticking around. So we want to make sure that you well on your way in the next phase of your life. I wanted to give kind of like a brief update of kind of like what's next. So we did win this, but the battle is not over. We won the fight. The battle is not over. There are going to be multiple lawsuits coming up. There may be something passed at the state legislature, kind of like a PA4 light or a PA4 2 or something else, and there's going to be a plenty of court battles with this. But I wanted to say, if you wish to join this movement, and once again, this is a movement, grassroots, and if people want to really get with the people on this, we are going to be hosting a meeting this Friday, November 16th, 5:30 at Chip's Supper Club on the corner of Richfield and Center Road. So if folks really want to kind of get with this movement and figure out what next steps are, because I'm personally committed in fighting to restoring democracy, not only within the city of Flint, but around the state. And I know that y'all probably want y'all power back, especially since y'all gonna be up for re-election next year, those of y'all who are going to be running again. So if y'all wanna get with the people on this, please join me, City Council and others out in TV land, this Friday, November 16th, 5:30 at Chip's Supper Club. Thank you.
Thank you, Naria.
Mr. President?
Councilman Neely?
Yeah, I do want to take just a small moment to congratulate Naira and all the supporters and the people who work diligently with her. I do want to make sure that I do this publicly. I want to thank you guys for all that you've done and all the fighting that you have done without the support of some of your elected officials. Those dollars that from contributors, you guys were very successful, and I do want to take this opportunity to say congratulations and thank you on behalf of the residents of the city of Flint and throughout the state of Michigan for the stands that you guys have taken. It was a very noble stand to fight on behalf of the people, and I want to congratulate you on your victory as it relates to PA4. So thank you.
Anyone else? Naria, just to let you know, when Ed Kurtz came in 2002 as the emergency financial manager, he said he wasn't going to stay here very long. He was here 18 months, maybe a little longer than 18 months. I suspect he'll be here as long as the powers to be in this community want him to be here. I wouldn't say the treasurer's office, I would say probably the powers to be in this community, and not any of us sitting up here. But I suspect he'll be here for some time until through the court battles, and probably until the state comes up with some sort of new law and figures out how they can get Mike Brown back in here. You know, my belief is that Mike has created a $16 million deficit because he wants to be here for the next 3 years. And it'll probably take that long to get rid of the $16 million deficit. So with that, our next speaker, Madam
Mr.
Clerk.
President.
Sorry, Councilman Lawler.
Yes. I'd like to suggest that we as a council take leadership in submitting a letter to the governor to remove Ed Kurtz from his office here as emergency financial administrator. I've read the law. When PA 4 was put in place, PA 72 was repealed. And so they currently are not here officially or legally under a law. And I know that they know that, but I just think that we should put something formal in a letter to them, letting them know that we're not accepting them violating the law and infringing upon this community as they are.
Okay. If that is a motion, I will support that motion to send a letter to Governor Snyder, but in addition, I would like to send another appeal letter to the Treasurer's Department, as we did before, Councilman Kincaid.
For PA 72?
PA 72,
Right.
If it exists or does not exist.
Right.
Either side of the coin, the city of Flint and its residents did not receive due process under the law as it relates to PA 72.
Right.
The financial conditions may have changed in the complexion of our financial disposition as it relates to PA 4 or 72. 4 does not exist, 72 does, but the emergency manager has put in assessments for street lights at $66, garbage assessment $100 plus, initiated a new millage. So the financial condition, in addition to that, he raised water rates. In addition to that, so we need to go find out if we even qualify under PA 72, because we have never received that due process. So therefore, we need to send that letter, resend that letter once again to the Treasurer's Department. I don't know if we want to do separate motions, Bernard, or do we want to do in tandem together?
I think that we probably, if we're sending a letter to same entities, we could probably do it in the same letter.
Okay, well, let's do the letter to the governor.
We'll draft the letter, kind of like we did the first one, and let all council members look at it and sign it, and then send it.
To the Treasurer's Department?
To the treasurer and to
And the governor.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, to the treasurer and the governor.
Okay,
'Cause
and
that's where it really needs to go first, the treasurer, and then
if my colleague doesn't mind that friendly amendment to the Treasurer's Department, I support his motion, and I would like to take a vote on
okay.
it.
There's been a motion moved and supported. Further discussion? Councilman Lloyd?
Just really quick, I'm glad you hit on the piece that you hit on, Councilman Neely, because I was going to support either motion, but I'm more inclined to support based on us not getting the due process. If minimal, I believe that the entire process should have started over if that law is in place. Now, I have a different position, personally, I have a different position based on my interpretation of the action they took in the repeal. I do believe, me personally, I do believe that Public Act 72 is on the books, and this is why. Because when they voted for Public Act 4, along with that vote was the repeal or the deletion of PA 72. And so my personal opinion is if that was repealed, then any action that they took within that vote is repealed. And that's just something else that we can look at and discuss and ask questions about. I don't know if we send a referral to Lansing to get their interpretation of that. That may be one. But I do believe that the process should start over, that these guys should be gone, that the control of the city, the authority should be given back to the elected officials, and then they can come back and do whatever they're going to do, give us our hearing or whatever, because we'll find that 9 times out of 10, we don't meet the criteria, at least where we were when they got here, to be under any type of, under Public Act 72.
And I think that the lawsuit that's been filed both here, Councilman Neely, and in Ingham County is challenging the fact whether or not Public Act 72 is actually on the books, because it was repealed when Public Act 4 was enacted, and now that Public Act 4 has been defeated, now we need to have the courts determine whether or not Public Act 72 is still in effect. And that's what the lawsuit is asking.
Well, one question, if I may, Mr. President. So if that is the case in communities, there are communities that have already started, I know, then I would like to see our leadership, well, not just the leadership, everybody on council, because we all have a role in this, that we reach out as a body to those communities and try to sign on. Right now, we could talk about we're in power and that we ought to have attorneys and all of that, but we know that the guys downstairs aren't going to write the check for that. And
well, one of the differences, or the difference between other communities and ours, they went through the process for Public Act 72 prior to Public Act 4 being enacted by the state. We never went through that process, and that's what our claim is, that we've never gone through that process. So, you know, that's why we filed the lawsuit over in Circuit Court, and why they filed in Ingham County Circuit Court.
Yeah, our belief in our position is that they are here illegally under PA 72 pursuant to the state law itself.
Right.
We don't meet the merits nor the to be received under PA 72, but we never received that due process under that. Now, I'm going to ask for the public to weigh in on this as well, because public opinion and public support has proven to be successful as it relates to PA 4. But on November 26th, this will be heard in the circuit court, in Judge Netherkett's court. Now, I would love to have a community type of rally or community type of showing of support, because this is our community, and as Councilman Kincaid has stated, the other communities were taken under PA 72 and then it progressed to PA 4. Our community was not. Our community went forth under PA 4, which is no longer in existence. That we now are sitting under receivership under PA 72. So a lawsuit was filed by members of this body, except for Councilman Wayhill, was only non-signer, to take them to court, to ask for due process is one of the claims there. And if we can get a show of community support, or where you are with this, to get due process for the constituency and the residents of the city of Flint, I think it would be proved to be beneficial. We were never given that opportunity nor access to do so, and they sit downstairs in control of a community under a law that we never got due process for. Everyone in this community should be very offended by that. Ed Kurtz came here with a pretty good reputation, and if he continues to do actions like this, I think in the minds of the community, he will soil that good name that he worked so hard to gain. Because PA 72 should not be administered at this time in the city of Flint. It should not be, and I would encourage our leadership to make a drive down to Lansing, to deliver the letter. Don't just mail it, put it in their hands. Look into their eyes and tell them at least follow the law in which you guys have established. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk. I'm sorry. Councilwoman Poplar?
That's okay. Mr. President, after the audit comes in, and we will soon find out that we're like $16 million in deficit, Is it possible that we could send a letter to the United States Attorney General's office to look into the mismanagement of the money for the city of Flint? Because I feel myself personally, in my opinion, if we send a letter to the state Attorney General's office, it is not going to do any good, because the state Attorney General is an apple, and so is Mr. Snyder. He's an apple. So apples to apples is not going to get this, but the United States Attorney General's office would be an orange, and we may be able to find something. And another reason why I made that statement is because the governor, after the election, continued to say that he feels that Mike Brown has done a marvelous job in this city. And we live here and we know so much better that he has not. So I think we keep going in circles in this state. We need to reach out, and maybe the Attorney General will listen to the elected officials that the people put here. So that's my take. I would love to see a letter going to the United States Attorney General's office.
If that's a motion, I will support that motion, Councilwoman Poplar.
Well, that's a motion right now.
Okay, as soon as we dispose of the current motion on the floor, I will support
It's got to
Councilwoman
go
Poplar's
bigger.
motion.
This is bigger than us. This is bigger than, this is big. Tired of it.
We've got a motion on the floor that's been moved and supported already by Councilman Lawler and supported by Councilman Neely.
Mr. President?
Yes.
The motion is to send a letter to the Treasury Department?
And to the
governor.
And to the
And to the governor requesting what?
To oppose PA 72 being enacted in our community. Am I correct, Councilman Lawler?
That's correct. The first one is to send a letter to the governor and to request him to remove these entities out of our community to the governor. The second letter to Andy Dillon and the Treasurer's Department is to request they go through the process for PA 72 that was never afforded to us, much like the first letter that we sent to them. So it's in standing to your, make sure you have a clear understanding of what you're voting on, Councilman Freeman, and we can separate them if it makes you feel more comfortable. But I think the first motion is to put the governor on notice that saying PA 72 is here that we believe illegally. The second is to request, pursuant to state law, and I know you're familiar with the state law, Councilman Freeman, to go through that process.
Yeah, I would request you separate them then.
Well, let's do these two first, and then we'll do the third one to probably our congressional delegation and to the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney General. So let's do ours first.
Well, I think
let's do Councilman Lawler's first, because he
And the first one is a letter to the governor telling him that we believe PA 72 is illegal. And let me tell you why I'm going to vote no on that. We're a party to two lawsuits where we're requesting essentially the same thing, that we don't believe, and I'm a party of those lawsuits, that we don't believe that Public Act 72 is in effect. I don't believe that Public Act 72 is in effect, but sending a letter to the governor, you might as well send a letter to that desk out there, because you'll get the same response back. You know, we have an opinion, they have an opinion, and we've got a whole third branch of government, the court systems, you know, that renders a decision. So I'm in full support of those lawsuits, and I want to see those go through, but I think it's a waste of time sending a letter to the governor, so I'll be voting no on that.
Well, I respect your opinion, and, you know, sometimes it's just those little things that we could miss that could make the legalities of this not be in our favor. And I don't see a harm with us just sending the letter as the body here representing the city of Flint to let them know where we stand. And if it fall on deaf ears, you know, it fall on deaf ears. But I think that that's part of our due process that we should do as a body here.
And Mr. President, I think they do know where we stand as it relates to our position on Public Act 72, because we're suing them over it. I think it's loud and clear where the Flint City Council stands. And the governor shouldn't be, he should understand where we stand. We're suing him.
Okay, the motion has been moved and supported. Roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
No.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Mr. Sargentson?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
The vote is 7 yes, 0 no.
Okay, then Councilman Neely, your request.
This is to make the appeal letter asking for due process under the law that is stated in the statute for PA 72, giving us the due process that is required. We did not receive that due process, and I'm requesting that they cease and desist under PA 72 until the process has been taken.
And that's similar to the letter that we sent back a couple months ago.
Yeah, but at the heading of this one, it should say cease and desist.
Right, I understand.
All right,
Okay.
that is the second one.
Okay. It's been moved and supported. Discussion? Roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Mr. Sargentson?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
The vote is 8 yes, 1 no.
And then
0 no, I'm sorry.
Then the motion, Councilwoman Poplar made to send a letter in reference to the emergency financial manager taking over the city of Flint, along with increasing the deficit into the city of Flint, and send that to our congressional delegation and to the United States Attorney General's office,
Asking them for
for them to intercede in,
investigation.
right, okay? And we'll work on that letter. It's
The U.S.
the
Holder.
U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, and our congressional delegation, which would be Congressman Kildee and our 2 state senators.
So would that be a copy of the letter to Holder?
No, the letter will go to Holder, and then the copy will go to our congressional
That's what I meant,
delegation.
yeah.
And two U.S. senators.
Yeah, to the 2 U.S. senators and to our congressman. Okay?
Mr. President,
Councilman Freeman?
what exactly are we asking them to do?
Yeah.
We're asking them to investigate whether or not, under Public Act 72, the city whether or not the state has the ability to take over the city under an emergency financial manager. I'm paraphrasing for you, Jackie, because I'm just thinking how we're going to do this letter. And to have them investigate whether or not they have the authority to take away the democracy for the residents of this community. And that's basically, you know, I will have to word the letter, but that's kind of in a nutshell what we're looking at sending them. Is that correct?
Right, but I want to make sure that they know that the deficit has climbed since we had Mr. Brown in.
Right.
But the governor thinks that he's doing a marvelous job, and we're getting deeper in debt.
Well, I think we need to point out to him that the deficit's increased and that he's imposed higher fees without any legislative action by the local government.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Poplar, just to be clear, in your first making of your motion, did you ask for an investigation to be done for any use of monies that was inappropriate?
Well, an investigation of the monies, the audit, all of that. Because the deficit has grown. We started with 8. We brought this man in here to help the city, and he hasn't helped the city. He's taken us deeper in the hole. But the governor can't see it because they're all friends. So we need an outside entity such as the United States government, because our money is being mishandled. He's hired people. The mayor laid off. He hired. He laid off. He hired. and we're going deeper in a hole, and nobody's listening to us. Nobody's, the money, and then they're killing the people.
I think
So
the motion
this is
appropriate.
bigger than we are, and people got, it's bigger. So somebody from Washington needs to come in and do a thorough investigation.
I think what Jackie's asking for us, for her and I to develop a letter, bring it before the council, have council approve it before we send it to our congressional before we send it to Eric Holder and our congressional delegation. Is that, so we all can sign, is that correct,
Thank you, Mr.
Jackie?
President.
Is that
That's what we
correct?
need to do.
So
Correct.
it's a motion to direct me to do a letter, and for all of us to sign it,
Okay.
all right? Is that?
It's satisfactory, but I understand the sentiment of what you're saying, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, but I do believe there were some improprieties and some of the mismanagement of dollars, to putting all these parties on notice to make sure that this community is made whole, that if the state has put a law into effect that is virtually illegal, that any monies that they expend, that they should make this community whole by reimbursing this community for any failed law that they have, and that they spent the money. They should make this community whole, because we pay the salaries for all of these individuals.
But Mr. Neely, I do believe that this letter, once we get it drafted and let everybody see it, it'll have everything that we need in it.
I'm on board, Jackie. I'm 100% on board with you. I'm just trying to assist. I'm on board with it, and anything that we can do to the positive for the betterment of this community, I think is good. So I'm on board, and I'm going to vote to support it.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
President.
just for the record, I believe that Congressman John Conyers of Detroit has already submitted something to Attorney General Eric Holder more than 6 months ago, and I'm not sure that he's ever received a response to his inquiry, so I would recommend that maybe there be some type of follow-up with Congressman Conyers' office
We'll do that.
before the
We'll do
letter
the
is done, yeah.
Okay, Councilman Lloyd?
No, I'm going to support whatever letter goes. I think we need to take a first step first. It should be no misconception about what the sentiment of this body is relative to this law and where we are and the due process and all of that. I do have concern about the letter being having too much in it and it not accomplishing what we're sending it to do. Now I support whatever it is, but I will hope the letter just encompasses this, that this law has been appealed, Public Act 4. The state is keeping us under 72. We have emergency managers here. We don't believe that, if we want to say we don't believe that it's in place, we can say that. If we want to say we don't believe that we've received the process, due process, which we haven't, that's that. And have them investigate not only that law, but also the process and the legality of the state continuing to move forward under this law, ignoring the fact that we're due a process under this law. Now, them owing us money back and people being responsible and all of that, my personal opinion, that's something we can deal with as a result of this, the findings of the investigation. But right now, we want the U.S. Attorney General to intervene and say, no, you didn't get the process. No, this law isn't in place. No, they don't have a right legally to have to take control of your city. And so I just want to say that we don't need it so broad that what we're looking for gets lost.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Councilman Freeman?
I agree with what my friend on the end down there said about concerns with due process. I do believe we were wronged under the way that it was implemented, but our due process, I believe, is to go to the appropriate court, and once that court has made a decision, then we move on from there, good or bad. So I don't think that, I think we're putting the cart before the horse, that we don't even have a decision yet from the most basic court, which would be the next step to go to. And until we have that decision, I wouldn't support sending a letter to the Attorney General.
Okay. All right, Councilman Sargentson?
Why haven't we heard, how long has this court, the lawsuit been in place? And why haven't we heard any results from the lawsuit? You know, I mean, we should be able to have some kind of idea by now what direction they're going in and what direction we need to go in.
Well, in Genesee County, the court
I think he's talking
had a
about-
motion,
he's
and
talking
they
about-
moved it. I'm sorry?
I think he's talking about the
The one that's filed at the state in Ingham
No,
County?
I think he's talking about the federal one for Congressman
Mike.
Congress office, correct?
I didn't know that
that
Congressman,
we have filed a lawsuit on Public Act 72 to find out whether or not
the hearing's
it's
the
lawful.
20 the 9th?
26th.
See, I thought it was the 29th, but whatever date it is.
Have we
It's coming
heard
up.
anything, is that like a court date upcoming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep,
That's
in a
what I
couple
wanna know.
weeks. Okay? All right, motion has been moved and supported for Councilwoman Poplar's letter. Roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Mr. Sargentson?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Certainly.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
No.
Okay, that deals with all of our motions and requests for communications.
I'll call for the vote. It's 7 yes, 1 no.
Okay. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Claire McClinton.
My name is Claire McClinton, and I felt obligated to come down here and address through you to the community congratulations for our victory from last week to overturning Public Act 4. We're very pleased about it. Power to the people, y'all. We did something that nobody expected us to do because I think the former speaker mentioned that it was a grassroots effort. And some people are saying, well, since there were 6 proposals and people just voted no on all of them and that's how, no, because there were grassroots efforts going on a year ago. The proposals that y'all brought up tonight, we would have loved to have heard those a year ago, because we knew what it was. But we'll take it now. We're happy to have it, because groups like Stand Up for Democracy under the leadership of Bishop Jefferson, we have a member of our own community, Paul Jordan, who was a plaintiff in the original lawsuit challenging the constitutionality. We have some of our young activist community people, Naira Sharif, who's out there with the Public Act 4 Task Force. And now we got you all on board too, so we're glad to have you now. But I just want to say, it's not a fluke that the citizens of this state struck down this treacherous, anti-democratic law. There were grassroots efforts going on all over this state. During the petition campaign, there were groups that organized themselves. They used handmade signs to stop cars to sign these petitions. There were numbers and numbers and hundreds of people who got it, that this is a terrible law, a law that can dissolve a union, a law that set aside your local elected official, a law that allows one person to sell off public assets, a law that allows one person to dissolve your community. It's enough to set the hair on the back of your neck. And some people got it and they went to work and they still out there waiting for the next round to stop this. Because this is a corporate formula. We as workers in this community and citizens in this community, we have maintained our water treatment plant, our water, our streets, and our lights, and our public parks, and all of these things, all these years when we were building cars and trucks, Brother Scott. But now that we're not building cars and trucks, it's as if as human beings and workers, we just kick us to the curb, threaten our pensions, our retirement, our health care, and all these things. So we have to make sure, and we're not stupid. We know the emergency managers is there to protect the bondholders in these different municipalities and make sure the Wall Street get their money. We see the big picture. So we know we got a fight on our hands. This is a class war. But people around this state, from Escanaba to Wayne County and on across, only 8 counties passed that. Everybody else voted it down. So I'm glad that our representatives is joining the party now. And I'd like to just say one word about Inez Brown, our city clerk, that we're fortunate to have a clerk in our city that we know that if we want to vote, we can vote. And it's not just important to say because of the Flint Journal, what the Flint Journal said, because we know that the Flint Journal is a corporate rag, and it always has been. But the reason why it's important to say that now is because of the tremendous campaigns going on across this country of voter suppression, suppressing the vote. And the biggest vote that was suppressed was Public Act 4. When we put you there, we're not always happy with you, but we can hold you accountable. We didn't want somebody coming in here removing you. We can do that, thank you very much, if we see that need, right? So in terms of that, we're glad that we got a clerk that everybody that could vote and wanted to vote could do so. And so that's all I got to say for now. Just one last thing, and I'm closing. These court challenges make a difference, even if you don't feel like you got a leg to stand on, because you have to stand up and fight for what's right. When Sam Muma and the Ask Me Local went to court and got Mike Brown out of here for just a few days because of the Open Meetings Act, it made the public more aware about this law. It made the public have a better understanding of what we're dealing with here. So you all going to court is going to bring public awareness to this issue. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Clara.
Mr. President.
Yeah, Councilwoman Poplar.
Just one note. Ms. McClinton, thank you so much for all that you do in this community, and Ms. Sharif also. But I am praying and hoping that once Mr. Snyder is up for re-election, that you will still have the same grassroots momentum going, because if we had this going when he was running, he never would have gotten here in the first place. So don't lose the names, don't lose the addresses, and I hope that all of us work as hard to get Mr. Snyder from where he is. So keep your grassroots going. It's very important.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Brown, next speaker, please.
Mr. Paul Jordan.
He left.
He left, all right.
Yeah.
Chris Del Moroni.
Thank you. My name is Chris Del Moroni, and I live in Flint, Michigan. It's unfortunate. We just went through an election, and as you know, that police millage was passed. And it's not so much about whether you're for it or against it. It's just that the community's been misled once again. Let me remind you in a few ways that we've been misled in regards to our public safety. Let me say blue badge, ceasefire, shot spotter, cameras in our community, neighborhood foot patrols, police mini stations. How's all that working for us? We were promised the sky, back in the election time. Let us not forget. this millage, I believe what we will see is a windfall for the powers to be in this community. We will see, I believe, many of the grants that we now receive funding for police officers stopped. Grants from Kettering University, the Mott Foundation. I might be wrong, but that's where I'm seeing it heading. Let me ask you this. In this community here, we have over 40,000 warrants outstanding. Has our city lockup been filled yet? I mean, what am I not understanding? The state of Michigan gave our community over $1 million to open that thing up.
$2 million.
$2 million. Thank you, Scott. And 40,000 warrants in this community outstanding, and we can't fill it up for one day? Well, this is what I would do. I'd let everyone know that who has a warrant that we're coming after you. Obviously, 40,000 people or 40,000 warrants can be taken care of at City Hall, but I know when they had night court down there, you know, people really didn't like showing up in their pajamas and leg irons. And I think a lot of those warrants would be settled. A lot of crime would be reduced. But you can't just add more police and then not arrest people and leave your lockup empty and don't utilize your courts. It all has to come together, and it's not. And I don't understand why not. I think the biggest problem in this community is that for years, for decades, we've been electing people to leadership positions who are not leaders. It's about politics, and it's unfortunate. You know, if Mike Brown really wanted to do something good for this community, he would no longer back those bonds for the Rutherford parking structure. A couple $100,000 a year on that. Add that to about $500,000 that we're paying for a second police chief, a city administrator. I mean, it kind of starts to add up after a while. I remember someone running for mayor in this community, who is now mayor, making a promise that 70% of the general fund would be going to police and fire. Well, now we're down to 55% of a smaller fund. And as it was pointed out this evening by you, Mr. President, that some of those 6 mills or all the 6 mills will be part of the general fund, and it's not set aside for anything specific. It's unfortunate. I just don't understand. This community for decades is, you know, it's been Auto World, it's been Hyatt Regency, it's been Windmill Place. It just goes on and on and on, and the people just get stuck with it. I mean, you know, we had a fairly good turnout, but, you know, where was everybody else at? That didn't, I mean, they should have been selling tickets to go vote. I mean, I know you can't make people pay to vote, but my God, you know, the hunger should have been there. The hunger should have been there for all that this community has gone through, for all that this community has been suffering. And I'll just take a moment to say that, you know, I've worked at the polls before. I worked at this one this year and 4 years ago and in years past, and I believe that, you know, the way the elections are run here in this community, City Clerk Inez Brown does an excellent job. Whether it be the training, whether it be follow-up, you know, her office is asking the workers to take notes, to write things down that can be improved upon, and I just think that needs to be mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Eric Mays.
Eric.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, Eric.
I would like to really try to get a lot in. This is an important meeting, the meeting after the election. Public Act 4 has been repealed. And I just know I'm going to go over. But I'm going to try to really get this done.
Thank you.
It started out to me, you know, during the last mayor's race, I watched stuff. I watched every candidate running for mayor because I was one. and I watched the efforts from 2010 to now. I can remember Michael Harris and I trying to get people to vote in 2010. We were out in front of the City Hall by ourselves. This year, we had help, and it worked. People votes. People are paying attention to that. But the Open Meetings Act lawsuit said something. It said something to me, and I hope it says something to you guys. This meeting started at 5:30, and in my mind, over 20, 30 years, I say this is the part of the meeting that the City Council hates. They hate to spend the time listening to the public. So when that happened with the open meetings aspect of the Public Act 4, I say I wait for the day when the City Council gets some of their power back and maybe they'll treat the public a little differently. And so I hope that all of that has happened through this process. So just remember, when you tolerate the public, it's a privilege to be able to hear from us. It's a privilege for us to work with you from this microphone in order to change the city. I'm a firm believer that whether I'm elected or whether I'm at this microphone or whether we're in the community on the phones, that we can work together and change the city. Councilman Nolan, Councilman Neely, Del Rico, as well as Scott, for the first time I called Ms. Poplar, I would say, continue to answer your phones. BB answers his phone very well. Neely, he answers his phone very well. Scott Kincaid and Lloyd, you can get to him clearly through the UAW. Sargentson used to answer better. He got to pick back up the pace. Josh Freeman always answers and return his call. Lawler, you got to get a little better at it yourself. I'm just telling you the truth. So the point is this: continue to work with the public. Open meetings, public input. That's what Public Act 4 said to me, because we're not here to upset you, we're here to help you. The young people in the city of Flint, who always gets a bad rap, I'm here to congratulate them. Naira Herb told us to make sure that you acknowledge the young people for voting. They stayed in line 2 and 3 hours. The young people in the city of Flint, they did something, and they should be rewarded and talked about. I guarantee you, they did something all across the state and all across the United States. So young people did grown folk stuff, because the young people we're talking about is between the ages of 18 to 30-something. I'm 54 now. The issue now is jobs, jobs, jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. We've got to do 2 things at one time, in my opinion, politically. We've got to continue to get the emergency managers out and restore democracy. The Voting Rights Act will be a part of that, and the federal claims, representative government. So we got to continue these lawsuits, but we've got to help the federal government and Barack and them. Their jobs bill was hung up. I would have voted clearly $5 million for jobs. I would have did a 0.6 mil levy for jobs. This council got to help provide the leadership in the community on jobs, because when you get income flowing, we buy land bank property. When we buy land bank property, we don't strip it and sell parts. We vinyl side it, lay new carpet, put new cabinets, and fix it up. But you got to get the young people checks. It's a way to do it. One of the golden spots that came out of this as it relates to jobs and understanding, I can assure you, is Howard Croft. We found something in the middle of this mess. Howard Croft is a person that can be talked to. I'll try to sum up.
Eric, you know the 5 minutes are up. I'm going to give you your time to sum up.
I appreciate it. And then when you look at how government works, it ain't just income tax and property tax. That's the general fund. That's why I talk about jobs. I wouldn't care if it was network marketing and bottled water. We picked up allies in this election cycle. We picked up allies with the faith-based organization, Pastor Randolph, Flint, and others, and we picked up allies with the UAW. Scott, Del Rico, Norwood, and Dawes and them work very well. It's a coalition. I'd say this, Mayor Walling has been absent in the middle of this political cycle as it relates to Public Act 4. I'm calling him out. I'm asking y'all to call him out. You cannot fix this if you got Walling running around with Mike Brown, the people downtown, Tim Herman and others, and then the council is running over here with the people. See, it's two entities of government. You got the legislative branch, which is y'all, and then you got Walling. Walling is doing a disservice because he's playing both sides of the fence on this issue. He's got to come out. He's got to be called out. He's got to be called to council meetings. If Walling and Peter Bade and them want to run around together, then have y'all got the power to make them come to the next council meeting. I would ask you to make a referral and do a special privilege to make us know where Walling stands in the middle of this before you. Use your powers and bring him here before the public, and let's get it out in the open. Because who is we fighting, the governor and Walling, or is Walling on our side? I would say this, Peter Bates is going to be tested legally on November the 28th. We've got another lawsuit going on. Every 68 district court judge recused themselves. I'm in front of Judge McCabe. That's an issue. I will win. I will prove to you that I'm a better legal man than your city attorney. I'm going to go out on the limb and say I will beat Peter Bade and them in that legally. I'll sum up by saying this, Scott.
Thank you, Eric.
Inez Brown, we don't always see eye to eye on voting and the mechanics of voting, but we talked. And I'm going to say this, Inez did a heck of a job this go-round. We broke all records. All records was broke in the absentee category. I'm going to still look at the turnout records. But when they said in the paper that Flint was last, I say that's cool. Ain't nothing they can do about it. I say the absentee is right in the news with everything else. So I'm a firm believer in God. Just left Pastor DeLoach's funeral. Jobs, open meetings, and God. Inez, you did a good job. People voted, and I'm going to take my seat by saying this. If what I seen this community do during the election, if they'll do it for jobs, we can fix Flint. We can stop death. The police department ain't just patrols, Scott.
I know that.
It's the Detective Bureau. It is the Detective Bureau. It's the people who you don't see that solve crime. So we're going to continue to take the mic. We're going to work with you. We're going to talk privately. And we're going to continue to vote. Ms. Brown, I'm telling you, what happened here in Flint and why I said was God. God wanted everybody to look at Flint. I wouldn't care if you were still counting votes. I say she going to count them honestly. She going to count them right, better than they counted them when it was Gore versus the United States. I had no worry about the count. I just know she going to piss them off because she going to take her time and do it right. Don't worry about the Flint Journal. When you call, we'll be there. We was out there in front of them in the middle of the election. So we're with you on this one. And we'll have some more disagreements. But God bless, you did a fine job. And we got to stick together as a community, Scott. You got the leadership, congratulations. I heard it was you and BB. Keep answering your phone, man.
Thank you, Eric.
God bless.
Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Wanton Davis?
Fine job, and we've got to stick together as a community, Scott. You got the leadership, congratulations. I heard it was you and BB. Keep answering your phone, man.
Thank you, Eric.
God bless.
Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Wanton Davis? 112? I'm sorry, I mispronounced your first name. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mr. Juantwez Davis. My thing is, and I kind of agree with what he say, I just think that it needs to be more in depth to get a greater understanding of it. You have people in Flint or in Michigan that is treated like second-class citizens, who has felonies on their record, who cannot get a job. They can bring all the jobs here, but these guys is going to be discriminated against. But if you really look at it in a scientific matter, that these are people who can't get a job that can easily regress back to their old trained pattern of behavior, who are master criminals. So if we want to resolve crime, we need to put something on the ballot, and we need to get with the state representative to take off the applications, do you have a felony? Because what sense does it make unless you are a pedophile or a rapist and they are registered anyway? So people can look them up anyway. But by saying, do you have a felony on your record, it's a medium or it's a form of discrimination and becoming selective on who you want, even though it said that the law prohibits us to discriminate against people who may have a felony. I have a felony, but I have a job, and I keep a job. But I also know people who do not have a job, and they're not criminals, and they ain't out here doing crime either. But I do know that it's hard for people who has felonies on their record and can't get a job, who has become civilized citizens, who have become productive members of society, who are mentors out here, mentoring kids. You've seen it on the news when the guy Mike Ville got killed. They had him on the news going around preaching to all the kids, but he couldn't get a job. Because when you can't get a job, and you do have a felony on your back, and you are a productive member of society, sometimes you can be at the wrong place, and something bad can happen to you because it don't take nothing but a split of a second. However, moving from that, there's a motion which you claim, and I also heard what you said, and I agree with what you said. Why haven't we heard anything about the court issue? You can file a motion to the federal courts that can make it an expedient motion to file an injunction that can go on immediately. The magistrate judge can rule on it, and in a couple of days rule on it, and can stop the whole process. And I think Peter Bay knew that, and I think many other people might know that. I don't know who knows it. I'm just surmising that somebody knows it. But you can file a motion to the federal courts that can immediately put an injunction and have them rule over that case immediately. Why should it have to go to the circuit court? Because Nellie made a statement and said that Kurt has built a good reputation for himself. Who doesn't know that Nethercutt may not think he's a good guy too? And law does stand, but I do know for a certainty that the federal courts, every ruling that they make it based on law, and they follow the law, may it be the Eastern or the Western District. But this is something that needs to be probably talked about. Walling, he could file a motion. I don't know who knows law in the city councilman, but they can get somebody who can file it. But it can go right to the federal courts, and the magistrate judge can rule on it in a couple of days, and we can end all this. We don't have to go to the circuit court. Ingham County, yeah, I think they're ruling in that favor because I think they ruled before. And I think everybody see that it's a great form of injustice. But bringing all these police officers here, that's a good thing too. I think the millage, I don't know if I can say yes or no on it, but I do know we can have all the police officers in the world here in the city of Flint, and it's not going to stop crime. It's not. It's not. People are poor. People at these particular times want to provide for their kids. They want to provide for their wives. They want to provide for their families. They are in dire need. They have become extremely up under bad emotional conditions. And it's a mixture of emotions that's going through people who can't provide for their family. So you can bring all the officers out here, and you can spend all the hundreds and thousands for the public safety man, whoever he is. But if you're not coming up with some alternative or some way to use some of this money in the general fund to try to build jobs from the revenue and get with these small business owners. Let's get with the people that own business that can't hire these guys with felonies on their record, because it's going to be a reverse cycle. And the more you keep sending these guys back to prison, the more it's going to keep taxing the general fund. Last I knew, it was $2.2 billion out of a $9 billion general fund that's being allocated to the Michigan Department of Correction. That was the last time I heard of it. I can imagine what it is now. I know it has not subsided, but we cannot treat these guys with felonies on their record as if they're throwaways when they're out here walking around in our communities. We cannot do that. I know my minutes is up, isn't it? I'm going to sum up. It's just something. I didn't come here anticipating to speak. But then when I got to listen to certain arguments and stuff nobody never spoke about doing something for people who has the propensity to go back and commit a crime. Nobody is thinking about these guys. Nobody is thinking about these guys. And if you don't think about them, it's going to be mayhem and it's going to be extreme havoc in our community because more than likely, these are the people that's committing the crimes. And nobody has actually looked at it. You're talking about, I'm going to sum it up. You're talking about throwing them in jail. You're talking about throwing them back in prison. But who pockets do that hit? Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, real quick, on that particular point, I can't remember all of the details of the dialogue at that time, but I do know back in the latter part of 2009, I raised that particular dialogue, well, really with the city of Flint about removing that question off of the applications. Can't remember what the dialogue was. What I do know, it didn't happen at that time. And so that maybe that's a question that could be raised, an issue that can be raised in the future about that. The reality of it is this, that, that even if that comes off of the application, any employer still has the right to do a background check. Now watch this. Now that's the reality of it. But the point that I raised at the time is we want to promote individuals being hired based on their ability to meet the task. Now I do want to say this as well. Now if an individual has a felony for a financial related crime, I don't want to hire him for a financially related job. You get what I'm saying? And so just about any employer is going to check that background piece. But at least if that is not on the application, then the first sight of that potential employer will be their qualifications. Okay? The second piece is this. I don't know if the state is doing this now, but this conversation, I raised this conversation at that time as well, for us to look at the grants that we have or any accessible grant related dollars that we can give to small businesses in the community for hiring convicted felons. That did not get done at that time, but that does not mean that that conversation can't go on, and it isn't something that can happen in the future. What I will do is have a private conversation with our senator now and our state representatives and our future congressperson, Dan Kildee, about the possibility of, if not already, of funding being given to business owners, particularly small business owners, for hiring convicted felons. If we can give them a couple $1,000s, or if the federal government, the state can give them $2,000 or whatever for hiring somebody, in this tough economic time, I'm sure that even those minimal dollars will be a benefit to a small business that's looking to make an investment, do some upgrades, that type of thing. So great points that you raised. We've had that dialogue before. It didn't get done, but it does not mean that we can't resurrect that and get it done in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Lloyd. Okay, our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Bishop Bernadelle Jefferson. Bishop Jefferson.
Good evening. My name is Bishop Bernadelle Jefferson.
Good evening.
And it's good to have a cheerleading team like Nair.
Good evening.
Just wanted to address a couple of things to go back about filing the papers. And I think it was raised before that we have to go over and beyond the state to file these papers. We've got to go to the federal level.
Right.
Because if we don't, we're not going to get anything done. Because we have to be reminded, it's the state that issued the grievance in the first place. And so we've got to go over and beyond it. It'd be bad to go against what I said I want to do. So therefore, we've got to go beyond it. The people have spoke twice now. They spoke back in February when we turned in the 225,000 signatures. And they spoke again November the 6th. saying that we do not want this. So it has been spoken and verified. One of the things I want to address about talking about the felony, the early release program, they worked on it from the prison, the early release program, and they had quite a few things intact in order to help the felons so they would not be retroactive and continue to go back into prison. And so that's what we need to look at. It was working on it, and then all of a sudden it came to a stop. But it was a good program because it dealt with every area of what the prisoner was in there for, what the felony, retraining them, helping them to get jobs. Just like the federal government, when a person is offering their job and they pay the employee part of the finances to hire those with disabilities, those that are off on disability, they can do the same thing for the felons that need a job. There is a plan. We just have to work it. One thing that I want us to do, and the victory on November the 6th was not Bishop Jefferson's, not Stand Up for Democracy, it was the people. We the people, it was all of us working together. And that's how we'll get anything done, is that we've got to work together, hand in hand, for the same betterment of our community. Another thing that we've got to become proactive instead of retroactive, and that's what it is. I'll be in Lansing tomorrow because they've already come up with another bill to come against us as a people. So we've got to stay on top of it to fight for what is right for our community, for our people, for our state. It's not just a Flint issue, it's a state issue. And so we've got to stay on top of it and begin to fight ahead of time. And that's all I want to say, is that we've got to begin to look at to become proactive. Thank you.
Good. Any comments? I would just like to thank you, Bishop Jefferson, for your leadership in this community and working with everyone and coming together for Public Act 4. Your leadership really helped make a difference too, so thank you very much. I'll let you speak.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to commend our city clerk for doing a fantastic job, working overtime beyond midnight hours every Saturday. I commend you because not only am I in touch with the city council in Flint, Michigan, but other cities and other states, the horror stories in Florida, the horror stories in Atlanta. There were horror stories, but I know that Inez Brown fought for the rights of this community. She went to various community meetings to educate the people. Right. Education is empowerment, and I want to thank you personally for empowering us to do a great job together. God bless you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Yes, our final speaker is Mr. Latham Jefferson. Okay.
No? Okay. All right, that concludes our speakers for this evening. We do have a resolution, I believe, in our packet.
Yes.
It was a request
It's on there.
to overturn an appeal for the Freedom of Information based on a letter that was received in the clerk's office from TDM realtors that had requested some information through a FOIA, and they were denied, kind of similar to when Councilman Neely about a year ago requested some information and it was denied, if I remember.
About a month ago.
About a month ago, not a year.
Was it a month ago?
Yeah, about a month.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's all right.
For some reason, I thought there was one a long time ago, too.
Well,
But
there
maybe
was.
not.
Right.
Okay. But anyway, we have a resolution 121084. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Discussion?
Mr. President?
Yes, Councilman.
I don't think that the last paragraph is right.
The last paragraph, the now therefore be it resolved, or the whereas?
No, the be it resolved.
Okay.
but I don't know what's right, so give me just a second.
Okay, I'll make the notes on it if he amends it.
I know that it should be deleted after on the grounds that Mr. Tannenbaum, I mean, I'm going to make an amendment or a motion to amend this, that we strike where it starts on the grounds that Mr. Tannenbaum was,
So just strike out on the grounds
the rest of that paragraph.
that
That the last paragraph should read, now therefore be it resolved that the Flint City Council appeals the Department of Law's decision to deny the FOIA request, but I'm not sure appeals is even the right word, because we're not appealing it, we're override.
Override would be a better.
Overrides, okay.
Overturning.
Overrides the Department of Law's decision to deny the FOIA request, period.
And let it go at that?
Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes less is better.
Okay, now therefore be it resolved that the Flint City Council overrides the Department of Law's decision to deny the FOIA request.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay? Is that correct?
Yes, that's my
So
motion
this,
to amend.
this will become a .1 then.
Yep. There's a motion to amend.
I've got it here.
It's been moved and supported. Discussion? Roll on the amendment? Yeah, roll on the amendment.
Just one second. Just one second here. Mr. Neely?
Yes on the amendment?
Mr. Sargentson?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yeah.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
The vote is 8 yes, 0 no.
Okay, now the,
Mr. President, I move 121084.1.
121084.1 has been moved and supported. Discussion? Roll?
Mr. Sargentson?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes as amended.
The vote is 8 yes, 0 no on 121084.1.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, we have no ordinances for first reading or second reading. Our next,
Council.
yeah, I'm not going to adjourn yet. I'm just going to announce our next meeting. Our next Flint City Council meeting is scheduled for 5:30 on November 26th. Are there any council persons wishing to speak? Councilman Neely.
Yes, thank you, Councilman Kincaid. I want to get this out, and I want to address this issue, and I want to talk to the people as well as my colleagues, if you guys will indulge me for a second or so. But right now, currently, the city of Flint is undergoing a hostile takeover. But what I'm concerned about more so is the collateral damage, and right now, the people are the collateral damage of this hostile takeover. I'm going to make a recommendation to ask Council President Kincaid to set up a subcommittee to fill in the gaps for the public where we're lacking at. Under this emergency manager, public access has been undermined. We have lost the Ombudsman's Office. We have lost the Civil Service Commission. And under attack now is the Human Relations Commission. We've lost the Victim Advocacy Program, and we know we have a lot of victims here because the city of Flint did not put up the matching dollars to continue to have that for the 68 District Court. We know when we get more of something, we get more of everything. Now, I love my public safety officers, but we know that Flint has, and every community around the nation has some type of abuse in their municipalities as it relates to public safety. But residents have nowhere to complain about their water bill issues, if it's correct or not, abuse of a loved one or themselves in the community. They don't even have the mechanism to go to the courts when they've been a victim of something to have an advocate on their behalf, because this has all been undermined under this hostile takeover. I would like the leadership of this council to put together a subcommittee, probably chaired by Councilman Nolden, now Vice President Nolden, to take those complaints from residents as it relates to their water bill issues or issues of abuse. Because we know if we get more public safety officers, more state troopers inside of the borders inside the city of Flint, more ATF officers, more FBI officers, and even county deputy sheriffs, that we're going to have some issues, and people don't know where to go. Historically, since 1968, around 1974 or so, the Human Relations Office was here, put into the municipality to help people with their issues. That has been undermined as well. It has been whittled down to a point of where they just provided referrals to Catholic Charities, Red Cross, and other agencies that could help people with their issues that they may have inside the city of Flint. That office will no longer be the face of it as it was in years past. So it's going to be incumbent upon this council that has a constituency outside the city of Flint to fill in those gaps for the residents that may be undergoing some difficulties. Now, with that said, on November 29th of this month at Prince of Peace Church, we're going to be holding a workshop for the people of moderate and low incomes that may be experiencing some difficulties with their tax obligations, showing them how to go through the poverty tax exemption application, because it is an expiration date on that. If you do not file by December 7th of this year, you would not qualify for that. It should not be an issue where people lose their properties and their homes to tax foreclosure if they cannot afford it. Now people are experiencing, since the incline of water rates and water bills, water liens are being placed on people's homes and being transferred over to the county. I receive calls, I can't speak for my colleagues or not, if they receive calls from people losing their property because of failure to pay taxes, simply because they cannot afford it. Senior citizens, people on fixed incomes, people trying to re-engage the workforce. They should not be pressured with all these additional things, and now with this additional millage, we got to really reach out with the tools made available to us. Ed Kurtz did provide a couple meetings ago, and Councilman Kincaid and I talked a little bit about this on the floor that day, order number 8, which is now that the poverty tax exemption street light assessments can qualify to get paid if you cannot afford it, using the same qualifications for the poverty tax exemption. Okay, so in my estimation from this anemic memo that was sent by the emergency manager is if you do not qualify for the poverty tax exemption, you will not qualify for this. So if the merits of the poverty tax exemption says that you have to have this filed by December 7th, I would assume that it would have to be filed by the same time, and there's no application put on file to date. So the only application that we have available to us is the application for poverty tax exemption, which could be picked up on the second floor of City Hall if you want to come and fill it out. But on November 29th, 6 p.m. at Prince of Peace Church on Stevenson Boulevard, we'll be holding this workshop trying to assist us. Chris Del Maroney, which sits on the review board, and every council person has a person that sits there, can assist people with that. But the collateral damage every day is being viewed and played out on televisions, especially on the northern portions of our city. We have eclipsed, again, probably our record for homicides in this community. I think the standard has been set to where a certain segment of this community has been devalued to the point of no response, we don't care, and that's just what the reality may be. Now, you know, the report card for the emergency manager, as it relates to some of the things that they have accomplished here, and I'm going to go through these things very quickly of some of the things that has happened since the emergency manager has been here. We've seen the elimination of 2 charter mandated departments. Now we're looking at a 3rd with Human Relations, a Busman's office, and the Civil Service Commission. The consolidation of the 67th and 68th District Court. And through that consolidation, a communication has been given to the 68 court district workers that there will be massive layoffs in the 68 District Court at the beginning of next year. The concern of mine is that losing the district, the 68 district, if they consolidate, at some point in time, we're going to lose our African-American elected judges. That's my assertion. 25% to 40% increase in water rates. People are being charged for water that they have not even used or accessed, I believe. And so we need to make sure that we address those type of things. A reduction to the public safety forces from 20 to 28% in our firefighters as far as pay concerned. Now we look at the current numbers of public safety officers that we have now. Right now we have in total 117 public safety police officers. That's from the chiefs on down, plural chiefs on down. We only have 58 on patrol duty to date. those numbers are important because you need to note where you are currently, so when you know that if we get any increase or decrease later. We have 86 firefighters to date on staff right now. That is important to know. In addition to that, 40 to 70 municipal workers were laid off. In Parks and Rec, we have a Parks and Rec director that probably supervises maybe 2 to 3 individuals that maintain this building. We no longer really have a Parks and Rec department. Our Parks and Rec millage that you pay for our parks in the city of Flint is about to, it's almost gone to date. It could be gone right now. We have no more money left there, but we do still have a Parks and Rec director. They outsourced the bidding for our senior centers for the millage that we share with Genesee County. They're going to outsource that. They no longer going to have that. The vacation of Genesee Towers, we paid about $8 million in surplus for that. It was relinquished to a private party or private entity for $1. These are just a few things, and I'm sure that my colleagues may have more, but even the pension fund, which almost reached $500 million, $500 million that we maintain and managed here, was illegally moved to the state from FERS to MERS, in my opinion. I say illegally because there's some inside things that I thought that happened as that related to the removal of Councilman Kincaid and myself, and then the appointment of Councilman Nolan and Councilman Freeman to that. But that money, the pension fund for municipal workers, had been moved from the city of Flint's control to the state of Michigan, and that's almost, it's a little over it's a lot over $400 million, but almost $500 million. And I think this is equivalent to what I see is a hostile takeover. But you, the residents, should not be the collateral damage as a byproduct of this. You should not. You should stand up for democracy. Bishop Jefferson, Naira, and the rest of the people, you need to stand up and fight for your rights. And I just wanted to put that out there. And Councilman Kincaid, I would ask you to set up a subcommittee led by Vice President Nolan now to fill in the gaps for residents as they find themselves in a void for help, because they don't have the help that's necessary that they may need inside the court district, as far as victim advocacy, as far as the ombudsman's office, looking at complaints of abuse and or water bills being in excess, and even municipal workers, as we look at some of the things that's happening as collective bargaining agreements have been vacated in part or in whole, and some of the things. But I think this council body has a responsibility and a duty to step up and fill the gap when it's needed as it relates to the people of the city of Flint. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Just let me respond real quick, because I will meet with Councilman Nolan as we put together the chair appointments for the various committees on city council, and that'll be something that him and I will talk about. So,
okay, thank you.
Councilman.
No, I was just going to suggest that you guys consider making Councilman Neely the chairperson of that particular committee. My understanding is Councilman Neely used to be, and I'll talk directly to you, that you and he used to be a member of the Civil Service Commission. He's been an advocate for that particular area, and I think that Councilman Neely will be a great person to head up that committee, and I know as a body we'll be working with them, but I would like to see Councilman Neely chair that particular committee. Councilman Nolan, I know that the Vice President normally has special affairs. I don't know if you guys are still going to do that, and I know I serve as his vice chair on grants, versus, I would like to see him also still deal with grants. So I know he'll probably have his hands full, but I'd like to see Councilman Neely chair that particular committee.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Lloyd, for that, but we don't want to circumvent the leadership of this body, and I do take that as a compliment, but the thing of it is that leadership should be administered from the leadership on down as voted from this body. And I do appreciate that, and I do understand the undertow that may come with that. I'm going to work with the people and the residents of the city of Flint, as I always have, providing them assistance in any area or in any area that they may need assistance in. But the leadership should be administered from the top on down. That's the president and vice president, and they should chair that. I will be happy to be a member of any committee, but it should be chaired, and I do understand that. But I think that's the direction it should come from. But please don't recommend me for anything. It should come from the top down, and I appreciate your compliment on those issues. I appreciate it.
I'll say one final thing. Our leadership, they're the leadership, and leadership does come from top down. My understanding is you guys are going to meet but my understanding is, as the last 5.5 years that I've been here, that the leadership has appointed council members to chair those committees, with the exception historically, at least since I've been here, of special affairs. And so we know that there's always discussion about chairs and committees, and so that is the reason why, and there is, that is the reason why I wanted to make that recommendation. I think that individuals shouldn't be just placed in committees, but individuals should be placed as chairs based on their strong suits, and I do believe Councilman Neely is strong in that particular area. That's a compliment.
Thank you.
And I understand I received that, but I would not accept the chairman's position on that issue as it relates to that, because it should be from the leadership on down. I'm strong in every issue just about as it relates to that, but I appreciate the compliment and you recognizing that, but I think leadership should come from the top and we should go forward.
Excuse me.
Councilman Nolan?
You know what, I do appreciate you suggesting me for the chair of that particular position if we do decide to go with that subcommittee. But I think when Scott and I, when we sit down and talk, I think we're going to pick the best person for that subcommittee if we decide to go with it. It's just a couple other things that I do want to talk about. I do want to appreciate and thank the public for all the support that they gave me on October 31st. We had the Halloween candy giveaway at Burston Fieldhouse. We gave away over 900 bags of candy. We had 900 kids that came through and got candy. It was a fantastic opportunity for the kids to be able to come out. They really enjoyed themselves. We did send out press releases, but because it's on the far north end and it was at Burston Fieldhouse, the media decided not to show up, which I thought was really, really a travesty, because we had over 55 or 60 volunteers. We did not have not one incident. We had people from all areas of the city, Rollingwood, East Side, North Side, South Side, so it really was a fantastic event. Secondly, I do want to thank you guys again for the vote for the vice presidency. I will not take this lightly. I do appreciate the trust that you're putting into me. And as we move forward, I'm going to do the very best job that I possibly can do. I know that this job is going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of perseverance, and a lot of time. It's going to really take a lot of time, so I do appreciate that. And I'm going to make sure that I do meet with administration on a regular basis, and I am going to be sharing with my colleagues the information that I do receive. When I was the chairperson of the Grants Committee and we got information, I made sure that I shared that information with everybody. I'm going to be very open and very honest with my conversations with them and with my colleagues. And just one other thing, with the subcommittee that Mr. Neely said that it should come from leadership down, I do appreciate you thinking that I should lead that particular subcommittee. But if we do decide to go with that subcommittee, I know with the other things that I'm doing within the community, and I'm very active in the community, and I'm very active at Burston Fieldhouse, actually making sure that everything is ran smoothly and I'm in order there, that might be something that I might not have enough time to do as opposed to the other things that I'm doing here. So it's going to be my recommendation when we do meet, if we do decide to do the subcommittee, that we actually put Shelton Neely as the chair of that subcommittee. And I hope that he will, take that in consideration, and I know he will do an excellent job. Thank you.
Councilman Freeman?
Yeah, Mr. President, I just want to clarify one thing that my friend over there said about the retirement system. He said that I voted to give it away to the state of Michigan, or to transfer to the state of Michigan. That's not true. I didn't vote to transfer to the state of Michigan. I voted to transfer it to MERS, which is the Municipal Employees Retirement System, which is a separate entity from the state of Michigan. I wouldn't have voted to give it to the state of Michigan because their rate of return wouldn't have been on par with what the city of Flint's rate of return was. And that was one of the two reasons I voted to transfer it to MERS, which is the Municipal Employee Retirement System, is because of the rate of return that they got versus the city of Flint, which was about 1% better than what we got. And also the city of Flint's abysmal record of calculating pensions, as evidenced by lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, where the city will go back and try to recalculate a pension 5 and 6 years after the fact. So that's the reason I sent it to MERS, the Municipal Employees Retirement System, and not the state of Michigan.
Right, I think I said FERS or MERS, but if I did say the state of Michigan, I think I did put all of them together. I do, it was transferred from FERS to MERS. Councilman Friedman is correct in that, and I think the assertion of, if I put the state of Michigan, say transfer to the state of Michigan, I think it's more of a state-controlled entity with MERS versus FERS, but it was transferred out of the control of the city of Flint hand, and it was a contentious vote because many of the people and personnel that was on that body, it was a 5-4 vote, which is a very close vote with a 9-member body, and with the removal of Councilman Kincaid and myself, and then the replacement by the emergency manager, to get a person that probably thought more aligned with their thinking to get it transferred out because it failed at least 2 previous times to be transferred out.
It did fail 2 previous times because Councilman Kincaid and yourself wouldn't show up to vote.
That's not true.
Well, you weren't there to vote when it was voting on, so.
That's not true.
That is true.
That's not
They held 2 votes and you weren't there.
Is there any other council person wishing to speak?
You know what, it's just one other thing that I wanted to ask, Mr. President. The letters that we're going to be putting together, that we're going to send to the state, are we putting those letters together, or are the council people that actually made the referrals, are they going to give us an outline of what they want? Because if we put it together, I think that if we put the letter together, then they'll come back and they're not going to like what we want. But if we know exactly what they're asking, I think that we'll be at a better position to be able to put the letter together.
Well, what I thought I would do is Ms. Brown and I would work together and put together a first draft based on what their recommendations were tonight. We've already done 1 letter already. And then before we send anything out, it would come back to this body for the approval of that letter and the signatures of everybody on this letter. I'm not going to draft the letter. I'm going to do a first draft. Okay. Give it to Ms. Brown and I will put together a first draft. Give it to the council people that have recommended, Councilman Lawler, Councilman Neely, Councilwoman Poplar, and we'll go over that letter, make any corrections, changes, deletions, additions, whatever, get their approval, then bring it back to the body, have the body approve it and sign it, and then we'll send it off to the appropriate people.
Oh, and the only reason why I asked, I'm working on a final paper for a class that I'm doing. It's a 30-page paper, and I'm doing a lot of writing right now. So
now, Ms. Brown
I just wanted to make sure.
Ms. Brown and I.
Okay, because I was going to start working on it tonight.
And we put the other ones together.
Thank you.
Councilman Lloyd?
No, I wanted to mess with my colleague because I know he called out a few things, but we know you do have enough time to be the vice president of the city council, right? I just want you to reaffirm that on the record so that nobody comes back and says, you don't have time to be vice president.
Okay, anybody
So,
else?
I know you do, but.
Thank you for being here this evening. We are adjourned.
What's that? Vice President.